I have nothing but admiration for the work that Marx did. I'm not a Marxist, but I can respect a great thinker, as I do Rousseau, as I do so many people in the Enlightenment and in the Renaissance and whatever you like. But at least, you know, these things are really very revealing. What I like most in women is weakness. And I'm not trying to put down a man who lived in the Victorian era and couldn't have given very much of a different answer. I would have said very much the same thing in the 30s for all I know, and undoubtedly would have. The thing that I'm talking about is to discuss that intersubjective relationship. Frau Marx worked recopying his manuscripts. She died 3 years before he died. She used up her eyes, she used up her health, she struggled for this man, and she's never mentioned, you know. Yet capital would never have been even presentable for a printer if she hadn't slaved over the manuscript, if she hadn't done this little dirty work and wrote the letters and got the money and kept the house and did all of that. And until that is revolutionized, and all she's supposed to do is be weak while at the same time giving all her energies to recopying his manuscript and taking care of the children and keeping the house and getting the food and doing everything that had to be done, and watching him make love to the maid, all of these things, you know, have to be straightened out. I'm merely using that as an example, not to malign Karl Marx, whom I deeply respect. Many anarchists were no different in that respect, too. So that is why I say the intersubjective relationship. For him looking inside himself, I'm sure he found very much. Okay? Or maybe he found nothing if he went too far. It's mainly in the interaction between people. And on that level, I want to see that cleared up before I feel that I can say I'm going to change society. I also want to see what I am going to do in my own locality. I'm invited to speak in many different places, but my main focus is in Vermont. If I can't change Vermont, or help change Vermont, or work with people to change Vermont, put it any way you like, then at that particular point I'm not going to have any impact upon the United States. So all of these things come together, you see, in a kind of coherent viewpoint, which I would put under the name of social ecology, and above all in an attitude of participation or participatory. And that's very important. And participation is not a tango with yourself, it's with everyone around you. Any other questions, please? Well, yeah, would you do that, please? I feel that I might be regarded as biased.
Not too intimidating. You could even stand up and ask your question so that everyone can hear you.
I can't hear you. Please, could you speak a little louder? My eardrums were really damaged by artillery in the Second World War and by a factory. And I'm terribly sorry, as well as age. Please speak a little louder. Because they're not innocent, they're sophisticated. That's the duality and the dialectic of it. That's the trick. If we're innocent, we will be very much in the position of the Indians who thought they were renting Manhattan Island to the Dutch. That's pure innocence, and that's the innocence of vulnerability. That's the vulnerability, more precisely, of innocence. Well, I'm sorry, can you just speak louder again? Yeah, but I'm not saying we can never go back to childhood or should. I say we have to impart rationality without destroying their imagination. While children are living in a pure state of innocence, then they are very vulnerable, obviously. While a people, tribal or otherwise, live in a pure state of innocence, they're very vulnerable. You're absolutely right. And if they live only on imagination, they'll just walk off a cliff. As in these cartoons, you know. Suddenly, whatever it is, runs across and drops down. You're not going to do that. So I said sophisticated innocence. What I mean is that we have to recover the whole experience, both its brutal side and its beautiful side of the human condition as it's gone back for thousands of years, its history, its culture, and yet not destroy in the process our imagination and ultimately in a free society, the innocence. The innocence that gives you the spontaneity of imagining. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking of an innocence that is gullible. The innocence that I'm talking about is the beautiful spontaneity that can at the same time be informed, guided by the whole experience of humanity. It's very hard to convey, but that play, the dialectical play of sophistication and innocence, has to be brought together. If we're too sophisticated without being innocent, we'll cease to be imaginative, and we'll become calculating. If we're, on the other hand, nothing but innocent, without having the sophistication that will condition that innocence and guard us, and guide us, then at that particular point we'll be totally vulnerable, and you're absolutely correct. I have no quarrel with you on that. I'm not trying to go back to childhood either. You must grow up. But how you grow up is the crucial issue in education and in socialization. Most of the people of my generation that I know anyway, I'm not speaking of people here, but those whom I know have become very cynical. I'm in my mid-60s and I was in the left since the 1930s. Very early on in the 30s, 1930. And I saw the rise of fascism, and I saw the Spanish Civil War and the Revolution, and I saw the Second World War, and then I saw war after war after war. It just got tiresome. And I saw the 60s, as well as the great trade union upsurges, and I was a labor organizer. I'm not an academic. I'm an academic by profession only, and now I'm retired, so I'm even out of that. Now I'm just what they call a senior citizen, a word I simply want to spit out of my mouth. I'm an elderly man, which is a fair enough description of what I am. I'm not a senior citizen. I know perfectly well I'm nothing senior in this society today. And I live off its dregs, so to speak. But at the same time, I've preserved, quotes, that innocence that still makes me believe that I'd rather die in failure, in changing the irrational world in which I live, than live on hollowing myself out until I'm really dead without knowing it. I've bitten the apple, so to speak, you know? And consequently, I'm happily, thoroughly poisoned. But it's a poison I welcome. Yet, I am as imaginative as I've ever been, and my mind, just as my associates know, and many people who've read my stuff know, I continually tumble out new ideas. So imagination has empowered me. Let's put it that way. Imagination has literally empowered me, not only come to power. That, I think, can be achieved. On the other hand, I have also, and I must say this as an aside, seen many people today who are younger than myself become so cynical that they are really hollowing themselves out. And I know that as they get older, they'll be closer to suicide than they realize. The only thing is they won't realize how close they are. And that will be as much a tragedy as having taken their own lives a long time ago.
Madam Tincture? Oh, excuse me. I just want to say that I now have 6 people on a question list. And as usually happens in events like this, men get to ask more questions than women. And all 6 are men, so if there are some women in the audience who do wish to ask some questions, I'm going to give priority to them, interspace them. Madam Tincture.
You mentioned a couple of interesting words tonight. One was the word bourgeoisie, that most of us have the word, since that's where most of the jobs are. And the other is participatory democracy. Since we end up mostly working with the bourgeoisie, how does one try and incorporate a life of participatory democracy from what's essentially a top-down management style?
You're absolutely right. I'm not going to make believe that I don't have enemies in this world, that they don't want to kill me and I don't wish them well at all. I'm not going to pretend that my mentality is so naive. Forgive me, allow me enough sophistication amidst my innocence as to believe that many people in this world would sooner see me dead than alive. And some would even like to see me tortured to death if they could help it. To the extent that I've had any impact, well, let's say people of my kind, so to speak. So I'm not, then again, I require philosophical distance and an aesthetic sensibility.